Folks, here we are. Here's the layout of the battlefield for our March attack battle I'm going to be playing this week. Pretty open terrain. There's a lot of height elevations, which I'll go into in a bit. But otherwise, the terrain isn't too substantial on the tabletop. And I do have some troops deployed, but I'll go into that separately. Let's take a look at the basic terrain features of the table. We do have some rough ground going on. This little field here with hedges. We got one there, and we've also got two fields down here. One there and one there, both surrounded by hedges. They count as rough ground in the game. They're going to slow you down. And they're also going to cause disorder, possibly, for troops charging in it. So it might play a role in the game if there's melees going on. I do have a couple buildings here that are currently on fire, and they're thus impossible to move through. That's a result of some previous fighting going on earlier in the day. Russians now occupy the position. But again, we'll go into that later. We have a road cutting across here, which will have an effect on movement, of course. And there is hedges and even some stone walls going on down here. And of course, that'll provide cover, as you would imagine, and obstacles to cross. Other than that, it's all pretty much open ground, pretty open and clear. The exception, of course, is going to be these elevation points, and there's quite a few of them. Let's see if I could get a model's eye view of the elevation points I'm talking about here. As you can see from the French position, there's some substantial height elevations going on. Yeah. Now in the game, hills are rated for elevation from 1 to 3, 3 being the highest. In this game, there is one level 3 elevation, and it's right here in this area, right in there. Below it, these other hills, which run along here, this is basically a big crest line. You can see that right there, and it stretches down over here. That's basically a level 2 hill. Okay, now in between this area of level 3 and level 2s, we have a pretty open space, which includes the woods as well. And this area is actually level 1. It's like a little valley in here, as you can see. Down below here, we have another flat area, which is counted as level 0, and that's all down here. This is our flat ground all the way over into this area. This is all level 0, and this stretches all the way around up into this zone here, which also is level 0. So that's the lowest point of the battlefield. And all this in here, down next to the burning building. So the only elevation points we're looking at here, again, is the level 2 ridge line, which cuts all the way across to here, up in this area. Right in here, it goes up to a level 3. Okay? This area here drops down to a level 1. This is our little valley. And there you go. Now what forests do, they're counted as level 1 in height. So they're going to add 1 to whatever elevation they're sitting on. So since this valley area is level 1, this woods area is considered level 2. Now that means it's about the same height as this ridge line. Now, don't get too thrown off by the height of my model trees, because I play 15 mil. They're a little bit larger than they should be for my 10 mils, as you can see. But that's not a problem with me at this point. I'm going to correct that in the future. Get some 10 millimeter trees. They're only slightly higher than they should be. So imagine this forest here, the same height as this ridge line. Okay? Now, this, remember, is a level 3. So this, anybody sitting here, like this hussar right here, he could see past this woods, okay? Because that's only level 2 in height. This is a level 3 area, so he can see over here. There is a dead space, which is equal to 1/2 the distance between the guy seeing and the obstruction, in this case the woods. So the dead zone is equal to 1/2 of this distance. So on the other side here, well, this distance here would be a dead zone. So I wouldn't be able to see over there. It's good to know. But otherwise, he could see all this stuff going on over here. So this is a major, important area of the battlefield, and I'll go into the objectives of the game when we get into it. So there you go, folks. This right here, of course, would be a level 1 forest sitting on a level 0 ground. So this is level 1. This ridge line, remember, is level 2, and they could see over this. And of course, there'll be a dead space on the other side of the woods, as I explained here. But I don't want to overcomplicate it all. That's in general how the elevations work in the game, and we'll see if it has a major impact on the game. If you do know the rules, there's also a classification of hills in terms of their steepness. There's gentle and there is steep. Now, these hills are all considered gentle. There are a few spots that will be exceptions, and they'll be counted as steep, and they're pretty treacherous. They can disorder you, and not be good to fight a combat over there and charge up them. Like this area here is going to be considered steep, and there might be another spot. I think there's one right here, and a little area over here we have a steep spot. But that's about it. Everything else is gentle. I don't think that's going to play a big role in the game. So there you go, folks. That's the layout of the terrain, and in general, an idea of the battlefield. And I'm going to be fighting over today. So stay tuned, folks. The next up, I'm going to go into the armies, the deployments, and the objectives in this battle. Next thing I'm going to talk about is the objectives of the scenario. Now, first of all, you got to keep in mind that this is only a small part of an actual bigger battle involving tens of thousands of troops going on. This is a point of decision in this battle, and there's some particular objectives that the French are trying to capture, and the Russians are trying to secure. Now, what's happening here is we have 3 objectives, and I mark them on the tabletop with these little red markers, and I'll keep them on there for the video's sake. But basically what they represent is, this here is the heights, and I'll refer to them as the heights during this battle. And the French want to capture this position if they can, because it does in fact have a really good line of sight to other areas of the battlefield. So this is a distinct advantage on this large battlefield going on. Also, this part of the heights as well is an objective. If you control these points, you control the heights in this battlefield. Also, an objective down here is these 2 farm buildings, basically the farm area. Of course, again, the buildings are on fire, but it's still an objective point for this game. So there's basically 3 objectives. The heights, which are indicated with these 2 markers, and the farm area, which will be indicated with that marker down there in the middle between the buildings. Now, the battle's going to go about 4 hours, so we're talking about maybe 10 to 14 turns, and I'll fill you in as we get close to that point as to what's going to happen. But there is a time limit to this battle, and the French are trying to secure the majority of these objectives, in other words, 2 out of the 3. If they manage to secure all 3 and not break, they will win a decisive victory in this battle. If they manage to secure the majority of those objectives, 2 of the 3, they'll basically get a nice victory regardless. The same goes for the French. They will win a decisive victory if they can retain control of all 3 objectives, or have the majority of them and claim a normal victory. So that's how it goes. It's basically fighting for control of the heights and control of this area of the battlefield where the road is in the village. We'll call it the farmhouse objective. Currently, the Russians are in control of them, and the French basically have to wrest control from the Russians. Put a little context on this. We have Davout in command of this corps of French coming from the west side of the battlefield, and he's got about 5 divisions of troops coming in here to take this objective. Now, the Russians are pretty light when it comes to defending this area. They basically have, I think, about 4 divisions in all that they can call upon for the battle. Not all of them are on the table. Neither are the French, actually. I'm just putting them there to show the location where they start from. But they do have 4 battle groups of cavalry, which are basically 2 regiments broken up into smaller squadrons units. It's called battle groups in the rules of March Attack. So there's 4 of them, and they're located right here. They're already on the battlefield, and they're basically spotting out the heights at this moment, and they basically see the approach of the French. So they're going to get a jump on the French at this point. Down here there was some fighting earlier in the battle. A division of Russians and a division of French infantry were going at it, and the Russians came out on top. They pretty much are pretty under strength and had to converge some of their battalions. There's 3 battalions down here, including some guns. Basically they converged their troops together, and they're basically 3 battalions as opposed to say 4, 5 or 6 or so. So they're actually large-sized battalions at this point. And the French are coming back for some revenge, and they're over in this area here. And I'll talk about the forces in the next part of the video. But suffice it to say that the Russians are in control of the objectives currently. If they can hold on to those objectives for the battlefield's length, or the battle's length, which is about, I'd say, 10 to 14 turns, they will win. The French have to try and capture those objectives, or at least the majority of them, without breaking, to secure any kind of victory. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the forces themselves. Now we're going to take a look at the Russians and see what's going on. Now, not everything is on the table in turn 1, but I will describe what their forces are and if they are on the table. Now, for the Russians, the corps commander here is Tuchkov, and he's taken from the Battle of Borodino. He's not the best commander. He's pretty average, maybe a little bit slow getting his troops to do things, but that's about it. Anyway, in his force, he's got about 4 divisions of troops. And retaining control of the heights, and they're warning the Russians at this point of the advance of the French. The rest of that division of cavalry is made up of 2 regiments of cuirassiers, which I have over here. This is the Glukov regiment. So that's the cavalry division. Also, we have over here a division of five battalions of grenadiers. Now these aren't converged grenadiers. These are a little bit better trained grenadiers, and they also have some foot guns as well. And this division will not be moving on to the battlefield until turn 2, I believe. They're on their way, basically. The 3rd division that they have is located over here. This is a musketeer division, and they're not all deployed on the table either, but what is there will be able to move on to the board in turn 1. I believe there's 3 more battalions in this group right here, so altogether it's about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 battalions plus some foot guns. Yeah, and Tuchkov himself is down here. He's right there. That's his little command stand. So yeah, that's the 3rd division in the army, and they're moving up to reinforce this pretty much under-strength unit that's been engaged all day in fighting. This division up here is another musketeer regiment, or division, sorry. It's made up of 3 battalions, and plus they have some foot guns as well. So that's the Russian forces. Now, again, they have this unit, which will be able to take action in the first turn. This division will be moving on in the first turn. And all the way down here, we've got the cavalry division, which includes these cuirassiers, which will be moving in the first turn. The only thing that will not be moving for the Russians in the first turn is this division of grenadiers. They'll be coming on the board from this position here on turn 2. So they're moving in to kind of reinforce this heights area, or whatever they can decide to do to secure victory. So that's the Russians, folks. See if Tuchkov can save the day for the Russians. Now let's take a look at the French. One other thing I should point out for the Russians before I get into the French is that their cavalry division is commanded by Uvarov, and he also was in the Battle of Borodino. He's a pretty inspirational character. Actually, makes a good cavalry commander. We'll see if he's effective in this battle. Not very well known for his command abilities, but he is inspiring. So we'll see how that plays out. And he's located right there, actually. I have him on the table, so he's going to be able to take action immediately. And again, where's that 4th? That 4th Hussar unit is right there. So you can see the deployment of the Russians is here on the heights, and they got these guys behind this woods out of sight. Okay, so let's take a look at the French and see what they're going to be up to. Folks, let's take a look at the French. Now, this corps is commanded by Davout himself. So he's got good command ability in the roles, but he's not very inspirational. we'll see what role that plays in the game. The French have 5 divisions in all, 4 of which are infantry. 1 is cavalry. Pretty standard divisional commanders, nothing special or bad about any of them outside of Davout himself. But anyway, we have this infantry division, which is made up of 4 line battalions and 2 light battalions, and they do have some medium foot guns. Next to them is the 2nd Division, which is exactly the same. It has 4 line battalions and 2 light battalions and some foot guns. Next to them is the Cavalry Division, made up of 3 Hussar and 1 Dragoon regiment. And unlike the Russians, the French have decided to keep their cavalry together, organized in regiments, not battle groups. So 2 bases per unit. Now down there on the end, and these troops are deployed on the table and will be taking action from the first turn. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can get an idea what's going on here. We have a division of Saxons. It's 3 battalions of infantry. They don't have very good skirmish ability, and half of them are conscripts, but we'll see how good they do in the battle. But they will be supporting this division over here of French infantry, which was engaged earlier in the day and is made up of 4 under-strength battalions of French line and 1 battalion of light infantry. They don't have cannon. In fact, they're the only division that does not have artillery support. All the rest of the French infantry have medium foot guns. So that's the French, and that's the Russians. And one more thing about the cannon is that everything is medium foot guns. There's not a whole lot of artillery in this battle. Pretty much most of it is engaged elsewhere in the battlefield, so there's no big dependency on artillery. I think the Russians might have a slight advantage in numbers of guns. Everything's medium foot guns, so we're talking about 6-8 pound guns here on both sides. Yeah, so that's the situation, folks. Once again, there's a look at the heights that's going to be fought over. Take a little close-up look here of the farm area that was fought over earlier today. You can see the understrength division of the Russians. They got a couple units in line formation, got their guns deployed, and there's a 3rd battalion back here in column. And somewhere in that mess is their divisional commander. So there they are, folks. So to recap, turn one, all of the Russians will be able to take action except their division of grenadiers, which is right there. They will not be able to move on the board in the first turn. The first turn for the French, the only thing they're going to be able to move is these 2 units down here on the end, the Saxons and this understrength infantry unit. Starting on turn 2, they will be able to move on the board with their cavalry. And starting on turn 3, they'll be able to move on the board with their 2 infantry divisions right here. So you could see right away that the Russians, forewarned of the advance of Davout, are going to get a jump in terms of moving their troops. Again, they're going to be able to move all of their cavalry division on turn 1. All of this division down here on the flank, which has a lot of musketeer battalions. I think they said there was 7. But they're going to be moving on in the first turn to give support to this division up here that's holding the farmhouse area. Then starting on turn 2, they will be able to move on the board with their division of grenadiers. And we'll see what happens, folks. So that's the troops, that's the objectives, that's the layout, and next up is the actual battle. Let's see. So I guess we're ready to start the game. Let's get into turn 1, and we'll see what happens. We're going to have both sides go through the strategic phase, and then we're going to jump into the tactical phase, where both sides will roll initiative to see who actually starts to move their units first. So let's do that, and I'll get right back to you and show you the results of turn 1. Folks, finished the first turn. It's probably a good time to mention that March Attack uses written orders. You don't see that too often in rules today, but it's good. It's really enjoyable, particularly so with solo gaming. But anyway, I should go through how that works a little bit in March Attack. Basically, the rules give examples, really, of categories of orders that you can issue to your MFs, and that stands for major formations. In March Attack, major formations represent forces like divisions or large brigades. You basically divide your army into MFs, again, which represent divisions. So, and it's those units, those MFs, that actually receive orders, and you have to carry them out based on that. Some of the orders that it describes in the rule book are things like attack, defend, maneuver, and so on and so forth. So you don't issue orders to specific units, you issue them to the MFs, or division-sized forces. You can change those orders during the game, and it's as simple as rolling a die and seeing if it's received and applied that turn or not, and that's how it represents delays in getting orders. Better command structures are more efficient at that. So anyway, in this case, I should go over those orders and what was carried out this turn. First of all, I went through the strategic part of the turn, and there was no changes to any orders, obviously. Nothing really is changed. But the French did gain initiative, and they went first in the tactical part of the turn. And that's where you actually move stuff and shoot and all that good stuff. And what they did is over here, the only stuff they had to take action with was these two divisions, or MFs, that were located over here. Remember, there was a French infantry division here and a Saxon division over here, which moved on in turn one from the edge where they were deployed earlier. Anyway, this French infantry division is under orders to attack, followed by defend this farm area. So once he attacks this and gains control of it, he will go into defend orders automatically, so I won't have to change his orders. They basically moved forward. Got a couple units in line, some in column, and I got 2 units in reserve back here. And right there's their divisional commander. Now the Saxons, they were also moved this turn. Their orders also, well, not also, their orders are actually to support this division. Basically what that does is it has to have at least one formed unit, which is infantry here, within 9 inches of this division over here. Basically it allows me to move these Saxons up and support the attack to take this objective. I have no further conditional orders after that, so I'm going to have to issue new orders if I do take and hold that objective. Otherwise they're going to be sitting there supporting my infantry doing nothing, assuming that I do take farm. So that's what they did. In return, the Russians, they went second. They did move their infantry that were up in this division earlier up a little bit. Their cannon laid down some fire. Totally ineffective. Didn't do anything, even though they're effective range. They tried firing at these troops over here. There was no skirmish combat, by the way, which is done during the strategic part of the turn, not the tactical. None of that. Troops were too far away from each other. But anyway, they did also move up this division, this second division, forward along the road. And you can see all their battalions back here. There's quite a few of them. I think there's like 7 battalions, including a battery of foot guns, which is right there. Probably should zoom in a little bit so you can see what's going on. But yeah, there they are moving up the road. And their orders are actually to defend this farm area as well. So both of these divisions, this lead Russian division and this Russian division coming up the road, both have the same orders, that is to defend the farmhouse. So they're going to get up there and hold on to that position. And the Saxons and French are marching up to meet them and try and take that farmhouse. In the meantime, the French had nothing else that they could do, move on to the table this turn. Next turn they'll be able to move on their cavalry division, which is right there. The Russians, they also were able to move their cavalry division, which, if you remember, the cuirassiers moved on from this edge right here, and they're now located here. There's their commander, and their hussar regiments are located up here, the 2 hussars. And their orders are basically to defend, I believe, if I remember correctly. So this cavalry division of Russians are ordered to defend this ridgeline, which is basically this objective. And they've moved up with their hussars up there, taking a look at the advancing Saxons, seeing if there's anything vulnerable they can attack real quick. Who knows? But yeah, the next turn we'll see the French hussars and dragoons coming onto the board, so we'll see what happens. Okay, folks, so there's lots of stuff coming on the board in turn 2. Stay tuned. Finish turn 2. Let's see what's going on. Started off with the strategic part of the phase, of the turn actually. No changes in the orders. There was some skirmish combat down here, which was ineffective. Basically, the two units of French over here, they got the French line, and then the Saxons, I think they beat the skirmish combat value of the Russians up here by 3 or 4 points. And unfortunately, with the die roll, they caused one hit, which could not be allocated to the Russians because they were all in cover. So that did nothing. Besides that, we went right into the initiative, and the Russians got the roll, and they decided to go first. They were the active player. First thing they did is they moved up this division of grenadiers up to this ridge with defend orders on this ridge. So they are ordered to defend this ridge from the French attacks. They have some deployed guns there. Limbered, actually, not deployed. Down here, the cavalry, if you remember, are still in a position of defending this objective. They did have a Hussar regiment right here, if you remember. I missed an opportunity to actually charge during my normal movement this unit of limbered Saxon artillery. I did miss that. I was so caught up in moving the troops over by this farm area that I just missed it. So, let me zoom in there. Right there. So I did the next best thing, and I just basically moved him within 5 inches or so that I'd be able to opportunity charge this Saxon battery if it decided to unlimber. Yeah, so that was the next best thing I could do. As the Saxons, what I chose to do is move up a battalion to kind of support the battery, maybe provoke opportunity charge from the Hussars. Didn't work. I basically rolled randomly to see if the Hussars would charge them. They didn't, so they held their position. Net effect of that was that I basically left the Saxon battery in place, limbered. They didn't do anything. I just don't want to be charged by those Hussars, really, especially when the French cavalry have just arrived. They moved on to the board, all 4 of their regiments. They got dragoons in the back, and they're led by 3 regiments of Hussars. So they have orders to attack the enemy cavalry, so that should be interesting. The French are going to seek out the enemy cavalry and see if they can wipe them out. Let's see, down here by the farmhouse, let's take a little look at this. There, that should be a little bit better. Now you can see what's going on here. Anyway, up at the farmhouse, the Russians went first, of course. They basically moved their units closer into cover along these hedges. This unit didn't get all the way to the hedge, which is unfortunate, because when the French and Saxons moved, they did get to the hedge line, and they were able to put down a really close-range volley on those Russians. Quite devastating. As you can see, they are down to 3 CV, the Russians, right there. You can see that. Yeah, there it is. And those dice on there, that's the current CV values of the units. So yeah, there was a lot of fighting going on here, a lot of musketry. No charges or anything. This Russian gun has been putting down some fire on these light infantry. Got them knocked down to 3 CV at this point. Yeah, that's the situation, folks. And bounce out in here. You can see this situation over here again, where the Russian Hussars are threatening the Saxon position here. And of course, the Saxons have some troops in reserve, kind of a second wave back here, and so do the French. I won't go into the details of the units, but I do know that these lead units here for the French are both conscripts. These units of Saxons, these 3 Saxon units, frontline units, are regulars. These guys are conscripts down here, these guys are regulars, and these are conscripts, blah, blah, blah. Just so you know that there's actually more than just one troop grade going on here in this battle. I got regulars and conscripts all over the place, and some elites as well. So, yeah, that's the situation, folks. The next turn we'll see the French bring on their 1st and 2nd divisions of infantry. We'll see what their orders are and what they're going to do. So, wait for turn 3 coming up. Folks, finish turn 3, and Davout's divisions, infantry divisions 1 and 2, have both arrived, and I'll get into that in a second. During the strategic phase of the turn, there was no order changes. There was no morale tests required for the MFs. There was some skirmish combat down at the farm, and I'll get into that in a second. And that was about it. As far as initiative, which is next, the Russians won the die roll for initiative, and they decided to go first. And what they did is they advanced this division. The lead battalions of grenadiers advanced to the top of the heights along with their battery of artillery, which unlimbered, and is now in a position to issue fire, which it did during the turn, and did put some casualties on one of these advancing columns of DeVoe's 1st Division. So that's about the only casualties going on there. Now, again, the French did come onto the table this turn, and this 1st Division has orders to attack these heights. So heights number 1 will be their objective. The 2nd Infantry Division, which is approaching this way over here, again, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 battalions of infantry with supporting artillery. They came on with the objective of attacking and taking the other part of those heights, which is over here. And that would be heights number 2, which is currently being fought over by cavalry, and I'll get into that in a second. So yeah, that's the action over here. There's no real combat yet. We'll see how well the Grenadiers can do holding this position, though. Now, if we come over towards the center, if you remember the Russian cavalry, their orders are to hold and defend this part of the heights, this 2nd objective. And they seem to be doing pretty good. Earlier in the previous turn, if you remember, one of the Hussar regiments of the Russians did move up here to this location and was trying to get in a position to assault this battery of guns by the Saxons, which it never did. Unfortunately, the French did come in, and their cavalry, which was over here, did manage to charge that unit of Hussars in the rear. This Hussar regiment right here actually charged. And there was a melee, and unfortunately for the Russians, their cavalry was defeated. And there they are right there running for their lives. The remainder of their division, the Russians, is located right here. They got some cuirassiers that have been committed to the fray, supported by some other Hussars which have taken damage from melees that have happened. And there's a 2nd unit of cuirassiers right here. And the 4th one, of course, is broken, their 4th regiment. So yeah, the Russians lost a unit from their cavalry. And all this was due to the cavalry over here, the French cavalry coming in. Basically, their orders, the French orders, are to attack the Russian cavalry. And they're doing pretty good at it so far. Considered quality-wise, I think they're outdone. I think the Russians have 2 regiments of cuirassiers, which is far superior to the best the French cavalry have right now, which is their dragoons, which are positioned back here. No, they're up here on the hill. Get a picture of them right there. So yeah, the Russian Hussars were charged in rear, and that was the end of them. There was some more cavalry fighting right here. The French Hussars charged forward and were threw this unit of Hussars back, but the Russians counterattacked with some cuirassiers, supported by this previously defeated Hussar unit, and they were able to push back the French Hussars, which are right here at this point, and they are badly mauled. They only have 1 CV left, so 1 more and they're broken. Those little white markers, incidentally, you can just barely see them. There's one right here, and there's one back here. They indicate disorder. Those units are disordered, so they're very vulnerable in close combat at this point. So yeah, the cavalry melee continues. It still can go either way. The Russians are holding on to the heights with their cavalry, and the French cavalry are returning the favor and attacking the enemy cavalry. So we'll see what happens in the next turn with that. Over here on the far right for the Russians, there's quite a bit going on, as you'd expect. Both sides have 2 divisions apiece trying to attack and hold this farm area. As you can see, there's plenty of Russian units maneuvering into position here. You can see them pretty much all over. It's some musketeers with their guns, and they're deploying in the fields. Those are 3 infantry regiments for the Russians. They're occupying the field quite well. They also hold a position on the road, And right back here they have another unit heading up in column. And over here they got troops deployed in line. And on the far side they have another unit deployed in line, as well as right here. So this is like a kill zone that the Russians have set up. The French did break through over here. That's one of their units in column. And right here is a shattered unit of Russian infantry. They were defeated by this unit up here and this unit issuing fire from the flank. And this unit was broken. They're about to be removed from the tabletop. I just got them sitting there for the moment. Going back this way, we get a good view of the approaching French and Saxon troops. You can see they're approaching up the road. The Saxons have 2 columns of infantry. Basically, these 2 columns are engaging each other in musketry. Neither one has got an advantage at this point. The Saxons are approaching here. They did manage to take out this artillery battery, foot guns, that the Russians were holding that position with. So this gun was destroyed. The Saxons took it out. This unit of French infantry, light infantry, has fallen back. They're down to 2 CV left, so they're all but useless. And you can see they're also disordered. There's that white marker. Yeah, and the Saxons up on the hill, they have their cannon still firing away. They're not doing much. The Russians were wise enough to actually deploy in line, so they're not taking too much damage from the Saxon battery of guns. Over here, this unit right here of Saxon infantry was defeated, was holding this line right here and fighting against this unit with musketry, and it was defeated. So it is also broken. So yeah, the French have lost 1 unit of Saxon infantry. The Russians have lost a unit of hussars, as well as a battery of guns, and also a battalion of infantry up here in the field. So those are the losses so far in turn 3, and it's looking bloody. This farm area is really up in the air. Not sure who's going to take this position. It's too early to tell, actually. Both sides are heavily engaged here. I think it might come down to who gets this objective number 2, this area right here, these heights. At the moment, both sides is just cavalry. It's just nothing but cavalry fighting for dominance here. It'll be interesting to see the results of this, because what happens here, who wins this area, is going to have dominance with the cavalry. And where those cavalry go to next will probably determine what happens either at the farm or up here on the heights, where the Russians are digging in, basically. All right, folks, so that's turn 3. Those are the casualty counts so far. So far, it can go either way. It's too early to tell who's got the advantage. But with Davout's 1st and 2nd divisions moving into position, about to get ready to assault the heights, we'll see what happens. Interesting, folks. Next turn, coming up, finish turn 4. Let's see what's going on. As you can see, the heights have been vacated temporarily, and I'll get into that in a second. During the strategic phase of the turn, there was some order changing. Tuchkov did issue new orders to the, I believe it's the 1st Division, one that was coming up this road to help defend the village, with like 6 battalions, and they're mostly conscripts. They just got additional orders successfully carried down to them, and that was to also defend this area as well. So not only are the Russian cavalry defending this heights, but so also is the 1st Musketeer Division in the Russian army. But of course, they're still under orders to defend the farm. So they're going to be kind of stretched a little bit here as they're defending 2 objectives on the battlefield. That 1st Musketeer Division. We'll see how well they do with that. And yeah, Tuchkov got his orders successfully handed down, so no delays in that. This should be a pretty interesting area of the battlefield. You got Davout's 2nd Infantry Division coming up here to capture this. And they're supported basically by all the French cavalry, the Cavalry Division, which has orders to attack the Russian cavalry. And defending this, of course, is the Russian cavalry, which are about to get some help from the Russian Musketeer Division coming up from this direction down here. And you can see they already have some battalions, a battery of guns, another battalion over here in column, making their way up in this location to try and defend this spot. Other than that, the strategic phase, there was some skirmish activity here, but there's not much. A lot of skirmishers going involved here. You got Saxons and you've got the Russians, and none of them are well known for the use of skirmishers, at least effectively. The French troops down here are pretty lacking in skirmishers as well, so there's not a heck of a lot in terms of skirmish combat. So there was nothing, no losses were taken down there for that. Meanwhile, up here, we do have some action going on. Initiative went to the French this time, and they decided to go first. And one of the first things they did is start moving up their infantry divisions up the slopes of the heights, the main one being right here. Interesting that the French did send up 2 battalions from their second wave over here on the flank, still in column. And unfortunately, one of those battalions did get caught by this battery of guns. Put some casualties on them as they advanced up the hill. But otherwise, the French are advancing in line in their first wave here. They're supported by their cannons, taking some shots, and they did do some damage to one of these battalions of grenadiers. The Russians, of course, pulled off the hill. Not too sure why they occupied it to begin with. Maybe to lure them forward, I don't know. See what the French were going to do. But they did smartly take cover behind the ridge now, and they're out of line of sight from the French guns. We'll see what happens there. Over on this side, of course, the other division of French has moved up. We just covered that as well. There was some more cavalry action here as the cuirassiers for the Russians did charge the hussars that were here and forced them to retire all the way back here. They're down 1 CV left, and they're disordered. This unit of hussars right here behind the woods also has only 1 CV remaining. So the French are getting whittled down here quite bad. The only effective cavalry units they have at the moment are these 2 that are straddling this ridge over here. They have the dragoons over here, which are down to 3 CV, and a full-strength unit of hussars covering their flank. And that guy right there is their division commander. And again, the orders of the French cavalry is to attack and basically destroy the Russian cavalry, but doesn't seem to be too effective at the moment. I got 2 cuirassiers facing them, some hussars, and in the previous turn, one of the hussar regiments for the Russians was destroyed. This one, in fact, is down only 2 CV, so they're not in the best of shape either. But these cuirassiers are something for the French to kind of worry about. So there's kind of a stalemate here. And in fact, if we do take a look at the farm area of the battlefield, where the fighting has been the most intense from the very beginning, it kind of slowed down as well. No more losses in units at the moment, but let's see what happened over here. Right here we got the 1st Division did actually have to take a major formation morale check. If you remember, that division was the one that was originally up here. They had 3 battalions and gun and a battery of guns. They were the ones originally up here, so it was a very fragile division under strength. But they did pass their morale check, so they're still hanging in there. They're carrying on, folks. And I believe if I look close, I could see where their units are. The original units from that division. There's one right here. Okay. And I believe the second one is, I think that's the one right there. Yeah, so it's this one and this one. This one's conscripts and this one's regular. I believe that's what it is. The rest of these units are from the Russian division that has been coming up this road, which I believe is the 2nd Division. So that's the situation. The French column that was up here in the field did manage to get itself around, passed the valor test, change formation within the threat zone of these Russian infantry. It did so, and it's in a position now where it's in line and facing the enemy. Yeah, it's pretty intricate in the details, the tactical nuances going on here. I like that part of this game. You know, it's still got some tactical feel to it, some little decision-making things here and there. It's not all just grand decisions, which is fun. But so far, that's the situation over here. It's kind of quieted down a little bit. Both sides have taken a lot of casualties. I think the Russians might have an edge, especially with the reinforcements coming up to help them out. It's going to make a big difference, I think. So, yeah. So, folks, that's turn 4. That's the situation. I'm going to go into turn 5 next. I am playing this solo. It should be interesting to see what happens, especially up here with the cavalry going at each other. And what are the grenadiers going to do over here on the ridge? We shall see. Okay, folks, turn 5 is coming up. Stay tuned. Okay, folks, turn 5 is complete. We're about at the midpoint of this battle. And forces are pretty much heavily engaged on all fronts. There was no skirmish combat during the strategic phase. As I said before, down there at the farm, both forces involved, and there's about 4 divisions worth of troops down there fighting it out altogether, have minimal skirmish capability, so there was no damage done from the skirmish combat taking place. Nor was there any more changes in orders. We can start off up here. Initiative was rolled. Davout got it over Tuchkov. Game-wise, Davout has a nice solid +3 on the initiative, and Tuchkov has a 0. So you can see the advantage the French have in this battle in terms of initiative. Well, the French got the initiative again. They chose to go first. And as you can see up here on the heights, the main heights, the French have advanced yet again. They're up there in formation with the 1st Division of Infantry. They're trying to encircle the Russian defenders. As you can see over here, they do have a column of French troops deployed there. They're trying to encircle the Russians. Line formations all throughout. In response to this, the Russian grenadiers did advance back up to the heights and formed line formation. So they're getting into action, folks. This artillery battery continues to hammer the advancing French. This one battalion in particular has taken some good amount of damage. This battalion right here and this battalion and this part of this one did engage in some musketry, so there's a little damage going on there. Yeah, so that's the situation. This battery of guns is worth mentioning because it is part of the 2nd Division for the French, which is attacking this side of the woods, the opposite side, the other objective. But it did lay down some fire on the only eligible target at this time, which is this battalion of Russian grenadiers, and it actually has been hammering them with some effective fire as well. As you can see, they've taken some damage and are now at 3 CV. Not very good. Anyway, that's the situation. It's still relatively up in the air here on the heights, except I would say the French do have an advantage. They have some reserve troops back here yet to climb the hill. And their guns are heading up the hill as well. I'm sure they'll get into combat the next turn. We'll see what happens. There's the objective right there, that little dot. But it's still up in the air, folks. We'll see what happens. You're looking at the middle of the battlefield, which is the other part of these heights that are an objective that the 2nd Infantry Division of French are trying to capture. And it's being defended currently by the Russian Cavalry Division and part of I believe it's the 1st Russian Infantry Division, the one that was coming up that road. If you remember, I've mentioned it numerous times. They are dispatched to defend this location as well as the farm area, so they're kind of stretching themselves thin here. But there was a lot of fighting here in the middle, as you can expect. The French cavalry were ordered to take out the Russian cavalry, and the Russian cavalry are ordered to defend these heights until they get further support. Well, that's what's going on, and there was some more losses this turn, in fact. The Russians didn't come out on top of that. They have their 1st Cuirassier regiment has been routed. It's broken, as well as this unit of Hussar. So the Russian cavalry are down to a single regiment holding this defensive position, and it's right there, that unit of Cuirassier. They're fresh, they're at full strength, so we'll see what they can do. And one of the reasons why these cavalry were defeated, up here, there was some charging and counter-charging and opportunity charges going on. And one of the things that knocked these cuirassiers out of action was behind this little cloud of smoke, there is a regiment of light infantry, French light infantry, that put down some pretty heavy fire on the cuirassiers as they were attempting to engage the French dragoons right there on the right. And unfortunately, the cuirassiers were just cut down. It was terrible. The French had countered that charge with their dragoons and these hussars, which were at very low strength. But if those cuirassiers were not defeated, the cavalry of the French were ready to repel them if they could. I don't know. Never happened. Yeah, so that's the situation there. The French have definitely got the advantage here. In fact, looking at this situation, we can see that the Russians, the only troops they have in the area assigned to defend this objective is this cuirassier regiment, this battalion in column over here, and this battery of guns. And these are all from the 1st Musketeer Division. And yeah, they're heading into position now. At this point, the Russians still hold these heights, but it is definitely contested. The French do have their entire cavalry division still intact, although greatly reduced in strength. This unit of Hussar, it's down to 1 CV, which is very brittle. This unit of Hussar way in the back has been sitting here after its earlier defeat, and it's also at 1 CV. Dragoons are at 3 CV, medium cavalry. Still effective as a fighting force. And they're squared off against these cuirassiers at the moment. And on the other side of the heights here, there is some more French Hussar, which are at full strength. So the French cavalry is doing their job. They're taking out the Russian cavalry. And the rest of these units are French, part of the 2nd Infantry Division, moving up these heights, again, with the objective to take and hold this objective, those heights. So that's the situation, folks. It's heating up here in the middle. French have a little edge. We'll see if the Russians can kind of consolidate some of their forces, get some of these infantry up here, and retain control of this part of the heights. And of course, here all the way to the Russian right, we have the farm area, which is still held by the Russians, but as you can see by all the smoke, it is brutal. The 1st, and I believe it's the 4th Infantry Divisions of the Russians, the 3rd or 4th, I think it's the 4th. I'm not sure what the number actually is. But they're the 2 divisions defending this position here. And they're squared off against the Saxon Division and one of the French divisions that was deployed back here. Again, the skirmish combat was not effective. The Saxons have orders to support the French over here, and they're supporting them very well. In fact, they've broken through up here in this hedge line, 2 of their battalions. See if I could focus in just a little bit there. Right there. You can see where the 2 battalions have broken through the hedge line there. They did manage to break the unit that was deployed here of Russians, conscripts. They were broken and routed. And right here next to them, this position here is actually held by some converged grenadiers from the Russian 1st Musketeer Division, which is holding its own. It's down to 2 CV. It's been shot at by these Saxon guns for quite a while, but the cover's helping them a great deal. So yeah, this unit here has been broken and be removed from the table. Also in the middle, you can see a lot of stuff going on. We've got the road occupied by 2 Russian battalions, but the Saxons are behind them at this point. Both of these units are down to 1 and 2 CV apiece, respectively. That's not good. And ahead of them, more Saxons. Behind these clouds, there's Saxons, and there is more French infantry. These 2 right here are fresh, actually. So they're in trouble. Those Russians are in trouble, losing that position. There's also some Saxons right here, which are down to, I think that's 2 CV. So there's a lot of combat going on over here. Not much musketry. They're kind of far apart at this point. But as we look over further to the right, there is a battalion here of Russians that's fresh. And over here, this battalion here is having a duel with this battalion. And they're both at, I think, 2 CV apiece. So it's even-handed there. So there's plenty of fighting in the middle. The Russians do have a fresh battalion right here. And as I said before, right here as well, already deployed in line, covering this hedge line. The French are coming down pretty heavy, though. They have some fresh troops coming at the Russians. This would be the French 2nd wave hitting in here. That's this unit, this unit, this unit, and this unit. Well, not this one. That's actually part of the 1st wave. But yeah, they're getting in there. So they got fresh troops coming in. I don't know if the Russians are going to be able to hold this position for too long, actually, if you look at it. They don't have any more reserves coming in, so it's going to be a tough position for the Russians to hold. And yeah, if you look at what's going on here, it's going to be tough for the Russians as well. To be expected. This was not going to be an easy task for the Russians. Of course, there's our two broken units, which I have to remove from the table, Hussar and Cuirassier. And over here, there is a broken unit of French. I don't think I mentioned that, but that unit was also broken, and that was broken earlier by the Cuirassier, which are now broken themselves. They did manage to get an attack on these guys. They were not able to form square soon enough, and they were taken out. They lost the combat and were automatically broken. And they were right in this area, right here, if I remember correctly. So they were the first ones to greet the Russian cavalry from the 2nd Infantry Division. So that's the situation, folks. This situation is heating up, and it's going to be interesting in the next turn. As you can see, there's a lot going on and a lot of close combat about to happen very shortly. Okay, folks, that's turn 5. Turn 6 is coming up. Let's see what happens. Okay, folks, turn 6 is done. I got that out of the way. A lot of fighting going up here on the hill. Started off with the strategic part of the turn. There was some skirmishing, which the French and Saxons had the advantage on, but were unable to capitalize. They couldn't allocate that hit on the enemy Russians, so that was nullified. There was no change in orders on either side, but there was a morale test taken by the 3rd Infantry Division for the Russians. That was the one that was stationed up here in the beginning of the battle with 3 battalions and some guns. They finally broke with their 2nd morale test, and there they are. And they're totally out of the game. They can't rally, so they're gone, along with their leader. So all that's left holding this farm area is the 1st Division, which is all musketeers, all conscripts, except for one unit, one battalion of grenadiers, which they had. Not very strong, not very many of them, but there they are. They're holding their own. But we'll get into that. As far as initiative, the Russians actually got it, so they decided to go first, which was probably a good idea. What they did with that is they basically shored up their defenses up here, moved up to the ridge line, greet the French at close range. They exchanged musketry and close-range cannon fire with the French, who are also advancing up this hill steadily. They lost a cannon battery, unfortunately, which did some good work in this battle. It did a lot of casualties on the advancing French, but unfortunately it's met its demise. That's about it so far on this end. So this could go either way. Both sides have taken quite a bit of casualties and are still standing. So next turn or two should decide what's going to happen here. One side will break through, I'm sure. So that's that. Middle of the battlefield, the 2nd objective, which is right here, the other part of the heights that the cavalry's been fighting viciously over. It did have some very decisive moments, excuse me, to be expected with cavalry actions. As you can see, there's some missing cuirassiers. They are, in fact, broken. The Russians lost their last unit of cavalry, folks, right there. And that was broken from charging into a square formed up of light infantry who were veterans. And they were able to form their square under a sudden charge. And that was pretty much due to their training and the fact that they were veterans. I don't think the Russians expected that. Yep, they held them off. Both commanders, the division commander of the 2nd French Division, as well as the Russian cavalry commander, Uvarov, an inspirational fellow, if you remember. He also joined the Cuirassier in that last charge. But unfortunately, they were broken completely. So that was it for them. They were gone. One thing good that did happen for the Russians is they were able to break the dragoons that were positioned up in this position, if you remember, in the earlier part of the previous turn. They were taken out with close-range cannon fire, and I believe some musketry. I'm not sure. But yeah, they broke and fled, and they're now running for their lives way over there on the other side of the table. So I got to take them off the table. Other than that, the French kind of consolidated their forces. They got their full-strength hussars here, and their 2 weaker hussar units, one here, and one way over here on the other side, kind of pulled back, and they're pretty much under the orders of holding their positions because their orders have been achieved. The Russian cavalry were defeated, so they fall back on hold orders. So they're going to need some new orders. We'll see what happens with them. In the meantime, the 2nd Division of French Infantry, so far it's trotting its way up these heights here. Like I said, the veteran light infantry, which is behind this smoke cloud, along with their leader. You can zoom in, you might be able to see them there. The division commanders right in there with them, formed up in square. They held their ground. They fended off the cuirassiers' last little charge. And that one cavalry unit right there is proxying as Uvarov himself in this battle. So he's still in the battle, but for all intents and purposes, he's no longer in the battle. His troops are gone. So that's what's going on over here, folks. And as always, over by the farm, things are heating up as usual. But I think there's going to be a little lull shortly. The first wave of the French lines are finally starting to get to the point where they got to pull back. There's like this unit, and this unit all have 1 CV left each, so they're pretty much done for the battle. The Russians are holding the position well. This battalion of Russians did hop this hedge, though, just to get in a range of these advancing French, and did do some damage by doing that. But now they're out exposed, and the French are kind of taking advantage of that. And they do have a flank shot here if they don't get back behind the hedge. They're at 4 CV. Over here on the other side, there's another battalion yet that's down to 1 CV, so they're taking bad damage. The French are in a good, strong position, actually, in this farm area, simply because they have a second wave of units coming up to assault yet, and I believe that's at least 3 battalions. This unit is fresh. That's Saxon. This unit and this unit are both fresh. They're French infantry. Yeah, so they're doing pretty good. The Saxons, once again in this battle, are doing pretty good as well. Even though they're not exactly the best troops in the French army. I think they're all rated as conscripts, actually. But they're doing pretty good. One interesting thing is, here's the 1st Musketeer Division's commander. He's right behind this last unit up here, which is actually veterans. The rest of this division of Russians are all conscript. But this one was kind of an understrength battalion of veterans. They're basically converged grenadiers. And they've been holding that position there for a long time now. They've only got 1 CV left, and they're basically fending off these troops on this side, which includes these cannon, which finally the cannon got close range with them and finally can do some damage to them. They're kind of like a little rear guard at the moment. As this division tries to shore up its defenses. It's got a fresh battalion here coming up off the road to meet these Saxons in the field. Yeah, tactically it's very interesting, but it's going to be hard for the Russians, I think, to hold on to this another couple turns due to that second wave of French, concentrated over here mostly. But they still have some forces over here with the Saxons. This unit in particular is fresh, and this one's at 4 CV. But we'll see what happens. This area right here will be very interesting to see what happens. So that's the battle so far, folks. And as I said, both sides took a lot of losses. So far, there won't be any morale checks, I don't believe, yet. I think the French and the Russian, what's left of the Russians anyway, are still okay in terms of the troop strengths, so they won't have to make any division morale checks yet. But that could change quite quickly. Look forward to seeing the French cavalry get issued new orders, perhaps, and see what they do with them. But for all intents and purposes, they met their objective, so let's see what they can do next. And yeah, the Russians are a little bit hampered now, especially in this area, to defend it, since they don't have their cavalry anymore at all. Yeah, so this is going to be interesting. It's really developing, my friends. Davout, where are you? Look at the advancing columns of the 2nd French Infantry Division. All right, folks, we're going to slip on over to turn 7 and see what happens. Stay tuned. Folks, finished turn 7. Let's see what happened. Went through the strategic part of the turn. The French and Saxons down at the farm area did manage to do some damage to one of the Russian units with skirmish combat. The one up here closest in the field. That took a hit from skirmish combat. Also, the French attempted to change the orders of their cavalry up to a maneuver order. Let's see where they are. They're over here right now. I have a hussar up here in column moving in this direction. They failed to get the orders through. What they're attempting to do right now is to maneuver their cavalry, what's left of them, up and around this woods and get into a flanking position on the grenadiers over here, at which point their orders should change to either attack this objective, the heights, or attack what's left of the grenadiers up here on the hill for the Russians. So we'll see if that happens next turn, because this turn it did not. So the French cavalry remains on the hill holding their position. And that was about it for the turn. Initiative was rolled, and it was won by the Russians. Once again, they opted to go first. If we take a look over here, we'll see what happened. Basically, the Russians were up in a nice line position up here, doing some musketry exchange with the French. And it looks like both sides have just worn each other down to nothing. I mean, all these units and battalions up here have taken major damage. There's a lot of 1 CVs and 2 CVs in there. None of the French broke. The French are smart enough to pull some of their units back out of the combat. But unfortunately for the Russians, 3 of their battalions of grenadiers did break. So they're on their way off the tabletop at this point, folks. Those 3 are broken or removed from the battle. That leaves them with 2 battalions remaining, holding on to the heights, both of which are right here. Have a battalion in line exchanging some musketry against this column, in which they're winning. This other battalion up here, which moved from a reserve position up next to the just abandoned cannon, that's what the smoke is, and they have 3 CV left. They're in line and they're exchanging fire with this battalion opposite them that only has 1 CV. Unfortunately, there was a melee up here, and the French won that, and they have a fresh battalion here that just broke through on the flank of these grenadiers. So it's not good at this point for the Russians. They might be losing the heights very quickly in the next turn. We'll see what happens. But yeah, that's the situation, folks. The French are breaking through. However, Duvau's 1st Division is well worn. We'll see if they can take this objective. In the meantime, up here in the middle, on the second portion of the heights, this objective area here, the Russians still retain control, as they do with the first objective marker on the other opposite side of the woods. If you remember previously, the Russian cavalry was defeated. They're no longer in the battle. However, the only thing they have here is a couple battalions of conscript quality troops from the 1st Division of musketeers, along with their battery of guns. And that's all that remains holding on to this objective of the battlefield. And the 2nd Corps, or the 2nd Division, Infantry Division of French, are moving forward up on the heights here at this point, and there is some musketry fire exchange going on. And it looks like both sides have taken some hits. I think the French do have an advantage. The first wave is moving forward. The second wave is in the back here. Moving forward, and they do have a battalion back here in column moving up as well. And right there is the divisional commander. Davout actually is over here if you want to know where he is. He's up on that hill. And there again is the cavalry waiting for fresh orders with their division commander. So let's see what's going on over by the farm now. As I said earlier, one of the units, this one in particular, specifically, actually, did take some skirmish damage. It took a hit from skirmish combat. It was also charged by 2 Saxon battalions this turn, one of which was defeated and has since retreated back here. It's crazy, but yeah, that's what happened. A lot of it has to do with this hedge the Saxons were forced to cross and the Russians were defending. It wasn't a flank attack. This battalion up here behind the smoke, let's zoom in there and see what I'm talking about. That battalion right there with the white chips next to it, they indicate disorder in the game, was halted from musketry fire from this battalion. Unfortunately for the Russians and the Saxon unit, they're both at 3 CV, so they both took some losses from musketry and close combat. And that was the situation there. Once again, the Russian Grenadier, Converged Grenadier Battalion, still holds the hedge line with 1 CV left. Some of the Saxons did pull back, and there's a fresh one here. Well, it's not fresh anymore. It's down to 2 CV. It does have the Saxon Divisional Commander attached, and the Saxon battery of guns are trying to get rid of these grenadiers holding the hedge. And outside of that, the Russians do have 2 remaining battalions right here and here. This one's at 4 CV. This one's at 1. They are holding the hedges, which lead to the farm area where the objective is located. Now there is some shifting of lines here as the first initial wave of French troops start to pull back out of the combat. They haven't taken any more losses this turn. And the second wave forces, which are fresh, are moving up into position to assault this hedge line. Perhaps in the next turn or two we'll see that going on. So that's the situation down here at the farm. So folks, that's turn 7. It looks pretty risky for the Russians at this point. They are losing up in this area, but the French are on the verge of breaking as well. They have a lot of units that are worn down. It looks like the French are in a good, strong position to take this objective, but at the same time, there is a small group of Russians here that are holding on. They're not in too bad a shape. Tuchkov himself is right there. The farm, it's yet to be told. Like I said, there's still 4 battalions of Russians holding on down there, going against now the second wave of French and Saxons. One other thing to note is that the Russian Grenadier Division will have to take a divisional morale test, an MF morale test in the next turn for losing these 3 battalions. And also we'll see if the French can get their cavalry with fresh orders and see what they do. Okay, folks, next turn 8 is coming up. I finished turn 8 for the Russians. I haven't gotten to the French yet, so I thought I'd film what happened when the Russians took their turn. They got initiative, of course, so I'm going to cover that. But in the strategic phase, there was successful orders received by the French cavalry, which are down here up on the hill, if you remember, holding that position. They have orders to support the 2nd Division of French infantry up here. We'll get to that in a minute. So their orders did get through. Skirmish combat. There was very little skirmish combat going up here because of the limited number of units involved, but there was some. Basically no effect. Down here on the farm, however, there was some very effective skirmish combat that went the way of the Saxons and the French. Because this division of Russians is engaged with not 1, not 2, but 3 enemy divisions. They're engaged up here now, if you remember. Their skirmish capabilities were massively outnumbered because they're dealing with 3 opposing MFs, and their combined skirmish combat ability was applied against them. So in that case, they lost dramatically. They took 2 hits from skirmish combat, and I believe this unit up here on the hill took 1 of them, and I believe this unit down here in the farm area took another one. So there was some effective skirmish combat on the side of the French. During the tactical phase, again, the Russians won the initiative. They declared charges, almost like a last-ditch attempt to get some kind of momentum going for themselves up here. Both their grenadier battalions charged their opponents, weathered some musketry fire from the enemy, but managed to get through. Unfortunately, this unit of grenadiers that did contact this French column was defeated and is now broken, and they're out of the battle. So they lost the combat. They made contact, but they failed to win the melee. These French are regulars, by the way. Up here, the grenadiers were joined by their divisional commander, gave them a little inspiration. Going into the combat, they did take some casualties from combined musketry fire from the enemy French that they were charging, and this unit over here as well. They did take some loss. They took a CV damage. They were disordered as a result, but they did survive. They made contact with the enemy and did take the position, so they forced the French battalion to retreat. As you can see back here, they are broken and out of the battle. So yeah, the French took some damage over here in this area, but so did the Russian grenadiers. So now the only thing holding this position is a disordered battalion of grenadiers. That's it, with their divisional commander intact. And by the way, this division did pass their MF morale test during this this strategic phase. So yeah, that was passed. Now over towards the middle area, as you can see, let me zoom in there a little bit. I don't want to zoom in too far, it gets kind of blurry. This area saw some musketry exchanging going on between the lead front battalions and the Russians' cannon. Like I said during the skirmish phase, this Russian unit did take a loss. It's down to 1 CV, which is not good. But otherwise, it moved up and issued some fire. This column back here and the cannon also issued fire from their current position. This unit back here also took a CV hit from the French. They're down to 3, I believe, which I didn't mark yet. And they are joined by Tuchkov himself. So Tuchkov is getting involved here. While I'm at it, I better roll for him becoming a casualty. Now, the unit itself, the battalion, took 1 CV loss. That means there's a 1 in 6 chance on a D6 that Tuchkov himself was hit. So if this comes up a 1, he will be hit. So it came up a 6. So he's not hit by any of the shooting going on up there on that battalion. So that's how that works. Pretty simple. If it came up a 1, what would happen is you'd go to the rules, there's a table, and you'd roll on it to determine if that guy, that commander, was killed or if he's out of action for a few turns or whatever. But that didn't happen. He was not injured by the incoming musketry fire from the French. So that's the situation on the center of the area. This objective is still held by the Russians. The French are about to take their turn. They'll probably advance and do some fire. The cavalry here will be interesting since now they're in a order to support the 2nd Division of French. They might actually get into action, maybe hit a flank of these grenadiers, but it's a bad position right now for the Russians, right here in this central position. Not looking good. Now over here, we've also got some stuff going on. If you remember the grenadiers that were holding this hedge line earlier, holding back these Saxon units, they were broken in the shooting phase, and there they are right now, running for their lives. So the veteran grenadiers are out of the battle. They lasted quite a while. They're heroes, that's for sure. They did hold up that flank in that position very well. But otherwise, the Saxons are now free to advance, and they've done so. This unit here took some skirmish combat loss in its CV. Its commander, its divisional commander, is attached to it. It's down to 2 CV, and it issued some ineffective fire against the advancing Saxons. Also over here, I don't think there was much shooting here. Everything's pretty much out of range except for this area here. This unit was shot at, or issued some fire, was shot at, but received no casualties. And I'm not sure if they did any damage to these advancing columns of Saxons and French. If they did, it was probably against that column of Saxons, which is located right there with the green dye. Right there, you can just barely see them. That unit of Saxons is down to 3 CV. And again, there's let me see, that's a fresh unit, and that's a fresh unit. These 2 units are well down to 1 CV apiece. That's all the French have locally in this area. But yes, I do remember the fact that this unit did break a unit of Saxons with its musketry fire. And I didn't mark it yet, but there it is. It's back here. It is broken and out of the game, so the Saxons did take a loss. They have lost 2 battalions so far out of their original 6. So that will force a morale check. That makes that MF shaken. So they will have to take a morale test. That'll be interesting. I believe, unless I'm wrong. I'll have to look that up. That'll be in the next turn regardless. So that's the situation, folks. The Russians are taking losses, and quite possibly so are the French, especially if the Saxons fail their MF test. So now I'm going to go into turn 8 for the French and see what they can do. Okay, folks, I finished turn 9 for the French. As you can see, it's kind of vacant up here. The French took their turn, their part of the tactical part of the turn. They did launch a close assault here with this battalion against that lone grenadier battalion that was sitting here. They did hit him in flank, and they did beat him in close combat. They were supported by this battalion as well that managed to put some musketry down on the Russian unit. Another interesting note is that because these guys hit them in the flank, the Russians were unable to put down any musketry fire on them as they charged. So they went in pretty much unmolested. Regardless, the position was taken. The 1st Division slightly moved forward to really control the heights at this point. That's Davout right there. So the heights have been claimed, at least this part of the heights have been claimed. There is no resistance from the Russians. This division was broken. Middle of the area. The cavalry had their new orders, and they shifted their units around a little bit. As you can see, you got the hussars here and here and here. There's the full strength one with their divisional commander. Their orders were now to support the 2nd Infantry Division, so they just basically moved into a position to support them. I believe the support orders require at least one of your units from the MF to be within 9 inches of the unit you're supporting, so they're totally close enough. The 2nd Division, French 2nd Division, did advance forward with their 2nd wave. Their 1st wave as well made contact. They did charge forward with both battalions in the lead. This battalion failed to make contact because of the target battalion's return fire. So this unit was halted, unfortunately, and could not get into close assault. If you remember, the Russians had a battalion here, a battery of guns, and a battalion here with Tuchkov attached. So the Russians held their ground and halted these French infantry right here. Unfortunately, over on this side, these light infantry, French battalion, did make contact and close assault this battalion and won the combat. So they were taken and they moved forward and pretty much are claiming the objective. So that was the situation there. So they lost a unit here. Now let's go down and take a look at the farm. You can see it's just as dramatic looking down here and kind of vacant at the moment, and I'll get to that in a second. But net effect here, there was 3 battalions, I believe, protecting this area of the battlefield. I believe there's one here. There was a battalion here at this hedge line, and there was one over here, all substantially weakened. This one was the strongest at 4 CV. The French launched an assault here with their regulars. It was pretty even matched. The French did manage to make contact, and a melee was fought. Unfortunately, the French did lose that melee, and the French were forced to retire, disordered, which is where they're located right now. In addition, I believe there was a Saxon unit here, up here, that was broken this turn during the musketry. I think it was this turn. Well, anyway, it was destroyed, which was not good for the Saxons. I think that was the previous turn for the Russians. They wiped it out. But anyway, that was the results there. There was also a battalion that was sitting here, but there was no close combat. It was just at this hedge line that there was a close combat, and the Russians did win that, so they were holding their own. And that was pretty much it. Not a hell of a lot going on here. However, in the next turn, turn 9, there was going to be some divisional morale checks. One for the Saxons and one for the 1st Division of the Russians. The Grenadier Division for the Russians was already destroyed, so there's no need to make a morale test there. But their 1st Division, which was defending this farm area, as well as up here, which was really stretching it for them, did have to make a morale test. And it's simultaneous. Both sides made their tests. In the case of the Russians, they got a retire result with 3 CV hits. So what happened was every unit from this division had to take 3 CV hits and then retire. And I believe it's 8 inches, 9 inches for infantry. I'd have to look at the charts. But they have to retire back. And basically what happened is every unit on here, and there's 2 others here, were basically wiped out from the CV loss from the retirement. And this one as well. So they were wiped out entirely. So they won't be able to come back in this battle. This one, however, did survive the 3 CV loss. If you remember, it had 4. It retired. It has 1 left, and it's disordered 2. So that was the effect of the morale test. It wasn't broken, but it was forced to retire. And they're not going to be able to retire or rally, I should say, effectively, because the only unit able to get any CV back would be this unit. And to rally, you can only do it once an hour after the unit is broken. and in this case the unit is not broken, it's just basically forced to retire. So at this point it's pretty much useless. Let's leave it at that. The Russians are forced to withdraw from the area. Basically, they're just not a fighting force at this point because of the failed test. Now for the Saxons, now this was a tricky one. I was thinking, what's going to happen now if them Saxons break? Well, they got a similar result to the Russian 1st Division. They got a retirement, not a broken result, but a retirement result with 2 CV hits. So every existing unit on here for the Saxons had to take 2 CV loss immediately and then retire the 8 or 9 inches. I think it's 8 inches for infantry. Again, I'd have to look it up. And they did so. Unfortunately, it pretty much broke every unit that was still on the table for the Saxons, including the guns. Yeah, so they have nothing left on the table. That division is wiped out, basically, and has nothing to rally at this point. So that was it. Fortunately, that did not cause a morale test for these guys. That would be considered an army morale test because this unit did not break, among other things. But this unit, this division down here of French, is in a position to claim this objective without any hassle, really. I don't think this unit has got any fighting capability left with 1 CV. The French unit's up here. This unit is completely fresh. This unit's at 2, and that one's retiring with only 1. Yeah, that's the situation. So I'm going to call it here. The battle was supposed to go at least 10 turns, but that pretty much is about as far as I was going to go with it anyway. Just the nature of the scenario. I don't think it would go 11 or 12. It would be pretty much decided by then. But the max I had decided would be 12. So 10 was about right. It ended it. The French basically effectively claimed everything in turn 9. So by turn 10 they would definitely control everything, all 3 objectives. So that's the battle, my friends. It has concluded, and it is a decisive French victory. What can I say? It was a very good game. Some interesting elements to it. I really enjoyed it. I don't know what you guys think. If you know how to play the rules, what do you think? If you don't know how to play the rules, what did you think? It's quite an interesting game. It's got a nice feel to it. It felt like a Napoleonic battle. There's a lot of tactical decisions that have to be made, not just the strategic tactical decisions. Really good. I had a good time. All the commanders escaped the battle unscathed, except for one. I don't remember who it was, but he was wounded. I think it was... I don't think it was this guy down here, Tuchkov. I think it might have been the Saxon commander? Oh, God, I don't remember. But anyway, one of them, one of the divisional commanders here did get wounded and would be out of the battle for the rest of the game. So that was that. Well, folks, that's about it. Maybe I'll attach some more comments later about this game. It probably deserves a full review on my part if I have the time to do that. I don't think I'll add it to this video because it's long enough as it is. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something about the game, a little bit anyway. It was a really enjoyable game. Definitely had that mass look to it. Stuff going on all over. You got the farm, you got the heights, and you got the heights over here. Lots of things going on. Well, that's it. Decisive victory for the French. If I play this scenario again, I think I might put a little more pressure on the French, maybe end the game at 8 turns, perhaps. You know, that might be pushing it. But we'll see. It was a good game. Okay, folks, take care. I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you soon.